Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girirari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Girirari Yasharanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yasharanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astatara Sati Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvajakacharya Astatara Sati Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Ki Jai Prem Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Ananta Gaudi Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Shri Shri Radhe Krishna Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Jai Sankirtan Yagna Ki Jai All glories assembled devotees All glories assembled devotees All glories assembled devotees All glories to Yeshua Prabhupada Om Mangana Timarandasya Ganangana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Madho Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tatati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sargajatam Sagana Lalitam Shri Vishakam Vichamacha Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapete Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hiri Priya Panchakopa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavevi Namo Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll be reading from the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 2, verses 69 and text 70. So I'll read it through, and I don't know how it works. If somebody wants to chant the verse, you can let me know and they can chant it. So text 69. Sanisha Sarabhutanam Tasyam Jagati Samyami Yasyam Jagati Bhutani Sanisha Pashyato Mune. The word for word. Ya, what? Nisha is night. Sarva, all. Bhutanam, of living entities. Tasyam, in that. Jagarti is wakeful. Samyami, the self-controlled. Yasyam, in which. Jagrati are awake. Bhutani, all beings. Sa, that is. Nisha, night. Pasyata, for the introspective. Mune, sage. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. What is night for all beings is the time for awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic man. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in his sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with the self-realization activities undisturbed by material reactions. So Srila Prabhupada comments in this verse that the two classes of men, the materialistic men whose whole interest, everything, religion, economic development, sense gratification, it's all based on sense gratification. So when he sees the introspective sage, when he sees the devotee, he just thinks, oh, how sad, how pitiful that these people are wasting their lives. They're not enjoying. What kind of a future do they have to look forward to? Like sometimes when devotees join, their parents will be so concerned, like what will happen to you when you get old? You know, how will you be taken care of? You know, how are you going to make money? How will that all happen? And then on the other hand, the devotees thinking, oh, how sad that these materialistic men, that they're wasting their lives, that they're putting all their money, all their faith in materialist activities that are very temporary. Sukhalayam to Shashvatam, that so much misery and so much suffering, and it's all, any advancement they do make, material advancement, it's all temporary because it all ends at the time of death. So both of these classes of men are looking at each other and just bewildered really at how the other one exists. Although for the devotee, the beauty for the devotee is peaceful. And of course, there's a famous verse that I just love that goes, Nashtra buddhi yuktasya, na cha yuktasya bhavana, na cha bhavaya tashantir, asantasya kutam sukham, that one who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind or steady intelligence, without which there's no question of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So we see that, we experience that every day, that, you know, no matter what, we hear the news. Either we turn on our computer, we see it, you know, we hear it on our phone, or we just hear it from other people. you know, it's just out there, everything that's going on, all the commotion, you know, all the sadness, you know, there's people at the border trying to get in, they're miserable. The people on the other side of the border don't want them in because it's going to interfere with their life. It's just, you know, all the murders, you know, all the financial concerns, so much anxiety. So, and that can't be helped no matter what, except for the devotee. The devotee can understand, you know, Machasparasasta Kantaya Shitoshi Sukadukada Agama Paino Nicha Tamti Tikshajra Bharata, that this idea of happiness and distress are like the passing of the winter and summer seasons. You know, one season there may be so much unhappiness, but it will pass and happiness will come for some time, and then that will pass and unhappiness will come again. But this leads us into the next verse, which I'll read that now, and then we can talk more about it. This is text 70. Apuryamana patishtam samudram pavishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pavishanti sarve sashantam apnoti nakamakami. Apuryamanam, always being filled. And you can read this along with me if it's being shown. Achala patishtam, steadily situated. Samudram, the ocean. Apa, waters. Pravishanti, enter. Yadvat, as. Tadvat, so. Kama, desires. Yam, unto whom. Pravishanti, enter. Sarve, all. Sa, that person. Shantim, peace. Apnoti, achieves. Na, not. Kamakami, one who desires to fill desires. A kamakami. So translation by Srila Prabhupada, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled, but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Report by Srila Prabhupada. Although the vast ocean is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water. But the ocean remains the same, steady. It is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. So that's a pretty important point. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. And that was apuryamana, you know, that fullness that the devotee gets from sarvapati nirmuktam, that his, by pleasing the senses of Hari, of Hrishikesh, the master of the senses, that he automatically feels that fullness in himself. A Krishna conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the rivers flow into the ocean, but he is steady in his activities, and he is not even slightly disturbed by desires for sense gratification. That is a proof of a Krishna conscious man, one who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present, because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He can remain steady like the ocean and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill desires even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruit of workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desire to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. So this is so beautiful and so instructive, and we're so fortunate to have access to this process where we can become very peaceful right from the very beginning. You think when you first become a devotee and you first start chanting and you first start following the different processes of devotional service, which most importantly are Shravanam Kirtanam, are the hearing and the chanting, which just in class today, Pushkar was giving class from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it was explaining that our Bhakti Lata Bij, which begins and grows all the way up to the spiritual planet, and it's watered by hearing and chanting, and we can never give that up. Just like if you have a garden, it needs fertilizer, it needs water, it needs care. If it doesn't get that care, it will die. So it's understood that the Shravanam Kirtanam process will keep our Bhakti Lata Bij growing and keep it very verdant and full. So again, on the purport is explaining that word of fullness, experiencing that fullness. So there's so many examples of people who, devotees who experience that fullness, whereas other yogis who were very, very experienced in spending years and years in yoga and attaining great mystic power. Shobari Muni was one of those yogis who spent years, under the water and experiencing great mystic power. But at the same time, one day when he was observing some fish in the water and seeing them engaged in sense gratification, his mind became agitated, and he decided to come out of the water after so many years, maybe lifetimes, and again take up sense gratification. So he went to see a King Mandata, who had so many daughters. And although he realized, when I go there, their daughters are not going to want to marry me, which was the case. He was living in the water for so long, his skin was slack and wrinkled, and he had gray hair, and he had a palsy. His head was trembling. So the daughters really wanted nothing to do with him. But he, because of a mystic power, was able to rejuvenate his body and make himself very young and handsome and strong. And so when he returned, all 50 daughters were interested in marrying him and were actually all fighting over him. Actually, I don't think he'd be so good for you. I think he's the perfect man for me. So this went on until Shobari Muni decided to marry all the daughters. And with this mystic power, he was able to create, beautiful mansions with everything you can imagine, all kinds of marble and beautiful flowers and jewels and beautiful clothing and jeweled pathways. So much so that the king Mandaka, he was astounded, because the opulence that Shobari Muni was able to show was so much greater than what he had. And so he went on to enjoy for so long with all of his wives in so many ways. But ultimately, he became tired of it, and he gave it up, and he returned to the path of meditation and ultimately Krishna consciousness, and became perfect in that. But if you contrast that with someone like Haridas Thakur, who was very much engaged in the process of Krishna consciousness, Namacharya, always chanting the holy name of the Lord, even when he was tested by Maya personified, the most beautiful woman you can imagine, who was able to posture herself in so many tempting, seductive ways. But Haridas Thakur was not in the least affected by that. So in the verse, it says that the desire may be there, but the devotee doesn't act on it, because he understands it will pass. If I don't act on this, this will pass, and this is not going to bring me pleasure. So ultimately, the mercy of Haridas Thakur was able to liberate Maya Devi herself. So that's a devotee, along with giving up his personal material desires. He's interested in everyone else and how to liberate them. I recently gave a class that was based on the lecture that Srila Prabhupada, an interview that Srila Prabhupada had with the Lieutenant of Police in Chicago called Crime, Why and What to Do. I really love that lecture because Prabhupada simplifies the problem. So this lieutenant comes with a very sincere desire, seeking a cure for the problem in Chicago. So much crime, there still is so much crime in Chicago. What can be done about it? What to speak of New York, all big cities and everywhere, even in, Alachua and Gainesville, there's crime. So Prabhupada explains that there's a pious man and an impious man, and the pious man has a clean heart, and the impious man has a dirty heart. And so how is the prisoner ever going to be reformed if he's in a place where there's other prisoners who also have dirty hearts? So you find that the recidivism rate of prisoners who leave prison is so great that they return because their heart is still dirty. And Prabhupada explains that by bringing in transcendental sound vibration and by serving prasadam, that they would be able to improve the condition of these prisoners. And the lieutenant of police was very respectful of Srila Prabhupada, actually, and was really trying to understand the process. And Prabhupada kept on stressing these two things and explained that, we're going to continue doing this, whether or not you can help us. Although if you can help us, we'll be able to do it on a greater scale. So the Lieutenant of Police was asking, well, where would you want to start this? Would you want to start this, perhaps in a poor section of society? And Prabhupada said, why in a poor section? You think crime isn't going on in wealthier sections of society? He said, just like a hospital admits, poor people and rich people, both are infected, the poor section of society and the wealthy section of society. So this Krishna consciousness needs to go everywhere in order to purify the heart, because the point is that Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samubhava Mahashano Mahapatma Vidyanam Ivarinam, that Krishna said it is lust only, O Arjuna, that comes in contact with the material modes of nature and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring enemy of this world. So with, as people become in contact with primarily in this Kali Yuga, the modes of passion and ignorance, they become infected. So what is the hope of them becoming free from this, from these modes of nature? Krishna says, Mam Chyo Bicharena Bhaktyo Gena Sevate Sagunam Samitichaitam. And he says that Brahma Bhuya Kapate, that one who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, it once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes the level of Brahman. So by performing devotional service in a big way or in a little way, eventually people can become satisfied. And that's why Prabhupada really emphasized prasadam distribution. And that's why devotees, whatever chance they get, they engage in these two processes of Krishna consciousness. And we've seen the effect of this prasadam distribution of books, that, in so many ways that Kali Yuga has been retarded somewhat. Both things are going at the same time. Kali Yuga, and Prabhupada said that would happen, that things kind of polarized, that the theistic class of men on one end, the atheistic class on another end. But as long as devotees continue with these processes of book distribution, of transcendental sound vibration, going out and chanting the holy name, and that people can become purified and people can take to this process of Krishna consciousness. And we see all the time here in this area of Florida, because the prasadam distribution program has been going on for so long. I think, 40 some years. Gargamuni started it in like 1972. And at this point, it's pretty amazing, because what's happened is the college has given the devotees their own section to distribute prasadam. Like they paid some money for it, but it's theirs. And this has become an institution at the University of Florida. Actually, I think they just celebrated 50 years. Well, 50 years, I think Srila Prabhupada that's what it was, 50 years of Srila Prabhupada coming to Gainesville and instituting this program. And he said in so many places, especially in Hawaii, I lived in Hawaii for 10 years, he said it would be difficult for the people to understand the books, but just distribute prasadam. So in this way, people can become freed from these material modes of nature. Otherwise, there's so much talk of yoga, but unless it's bhakti yoga, in so many ways, yoga can make the heart harder. And that's not helpful ultimately for bhakti. So I know the devotees who teach hatha yoga, they also bring in bhakti yoga too. They sneak in bhakti yoga. But otherwise, we've seen with these yogis who are very exalted, Vishwamitra Muni, and the story of Ambarish Prabhu, who a great devotee, and he had been fasting for a year, Ekadashi fast with his wife. And when the time came for him to break the fast, Durvasa Muni showed up, as he often does, good old Durvasa Muni. And Ambarish Muni invited him in, ready to take prasadam. It was actually time for Ambarish Muni to break his fast. Durvasa Muni said, well, just wait, I'm going to go bathe and I'll come back and then we'll take prasadam. So Ambarish was in a little bit of a quandary because it was time for him to break his fast, but he didn't want to be rude and break it before Durvasa Muni returned. So he went to the Brahmanas and asked, what should I do? Because, this is the situation. I don't want to be offensive to Durvasa, but I also don't want to miss the time of breaking my fast. So the Brahmanas said, if you drink water, it'll be like breaking the fast and not breaking the fast. So that will be fine. So that's what Ambarish Maharaj did. He took the water. So when Durvasa Muni came back, because of the mystic power, he was able to see that Ambarish had broken the fast. And he went into a fit of rage. How could you do this? You call yourself a Vaishnava, just look at you. And you don't know how to be, cordial and respectful to other people. So in his rage, of course, anger, lust, and greed are the three gates leading to hell. So he took out a tuft of his hair, he threw it down, he created a great demon and set it upon Ambarish Maharaj. Of course, Ambarish Maharaj, being a great devotee who was famous for following the 9 preces of devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, bowing to lotus feet of the Lord, offering prayers, becoming his servant, becoming Krishna's best friend, that Krishna immediately let his Sudarshan chakra, which hit the demon and burnt him to a pile, nothing left but a pile of ashes. So at that point, the Sudarshan chakra turned on Durvasa Muni, and Durvasa Muni began to run. He fled up to Brahmaloka and begged Brahma to please save him from this situation, this dangerous situation. Brahma said, there's nothing I can do. I don't have the power to save you from Ambarish Maharaj. So he fled to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva also said, sorry, I can't help you. I'm unable to help you. He fled to Lord Shiva, same situation. Lord Shiva said, I can't help you. He fled to Narayan. Even Narayan, even Krishna himself said, you need to go to Ambarish. He's the one you've offended. I can't forgive you for that offense. You have to go to him. So he went to Ambarish Maharaj, he bowed down, he offered prayers, and Ambarish immediately, before he even bowed down, picked him up, embraced him, gave him a hug, and completely forgave him. So Srila Prabhupada says in Krishna book that this is the most important quality of a devotee, is forgiveness. So Ambarish was able to demonstrate that very beautiful quality of being forgiving. And then Durvasa Muni realized, so Krishna consciousness really protects the devotee in so many ways. In the case of the Shaubari Muni, actually the reason he fell down from his position and became so absorbed in the fish cohabitating is that he made an offense against Garuda. You know, Garuda had come to eat some fish in the lake where Shaubari Muni was residing. And Garuda protected the fish. So, I mean, I'm sorry, Shaubari Muni protected the fish. He had affection for the fish. So Garuda wasn't able to eat the fish, and Shaubari Muni, Garuda became offended. And so Shaubari Muni was cursed, and that was the reason for him falling down. So we have to be very careful not to offend devotees and to be happy in this situation that we're in, to be that word that was meaning in fullness, in complete fullness, and always satisfied in that way. Just, I was recently reading the more complete story of a Brahmin who went to a talk, a discourse on Krishna consciousness and deity worship. You know, this is a historical event. And he was listening to all the ways that the Brahmanas worship the deity with such opulence, with such precision. And this Brahmana happened to be poverty-stricken, but Prabhupada said not dissatisfied. So think of that, poverty-stricken, but not dissatisfied. So generally people who are poverty-stricken, they're dissatisfied. You know, they curse God for their situation, or, you know, they're always striving to improve their situation. So this Brahmana, after listening to this course, he decided that he was going to worship, because they mentioned at the end that even if you couldn't do it physically, you could do it mentally. So he decided, okay, I'm going to do it mentally. So every day in his mind, he would go to the different sacred rivers, to the river Jamuna, the river Ganges, the river Saraswati, and he would gather sacred waters in golden and silver pots, and he would bring that water back, and he would bathe the deity, and he would offer the deities, you know, beautiful jewels, and bathe them in very opulent cloth, and sing to them, and offer very opulent foodstuffs. So this went on for years and years, that he was mentally taking care of his deities. And then one day he was making the sweet rice. We all know the story of the sweet rice, that he was offering it, you know, stirring it, giving it the finest milk and sweetener, and heating it up, and then letting it cool down, and then testing it, and his finger became burned. And he, at that point, took his finger out and went, you know, and the goddess of fortune saw Krishna smiling and asked him, why are you smiling? And Krishna said, oh, look at my devotee, this great Brahmana, you know, what's happening? He said, I want you to go down, you know, send someone down to bring him up. So he was brought up, and he was giving the benediction of having the same living in close association with the Lord. So, you know, these are situations of devotees who don't have a lot of opulence, but they're pleasing Krishna, and that's the greatest opulence. And when I was reading the story of King Prithu recently, so amazing that Prabhupada was explaining that, you know, all the miseries of the world, because Prithu was the perfect leader. And Prabhupada was explaining that if leaders don't bring the people to Krishna consciousness, that it's a great failure. And he said that all the problems, you know, all the droughts, you know, all the fires, all the earthquakes, you know, all the famine, all the lack of food, all of that comes as a result, a reaction to sinful activity. So no matter how many material ways you try to rectify those problems. You know, how many United Nations conferences you call, you know, no matter how many conferences you have about that, no matter how much money you raise. And there may be some success, you know, with the climate change, but basically the real solution is Harinama, Harinama, Harinama Eva Kevalam. Kaluanasteva, Kaluanasteva, Yatirangata, that there's no other way. There's no other way. There's no other way. But by chanting this holy name individually and collectively, because the holy name goes around the world so many times. And as it goes around the world, it purifies everything in its path. And that's the real solution. Like right now here in Alachua, we're experiencing an influx of people. It's like places like California, they're experiencing, many people are leaving because of the problems of no water. Some of the lakes that they were using to create electrical power are so dried up that they're not going to be able to use them anymore. So many devotees and non-devotees, like a woman who's on the board in Alachua was explaining to me there's a plan for 5,000 more houses in Alachua. So I was thinking, you know, the devotees, the fact that we're here, that we're chanting, that we're distributing prasadam, is creating this beautiful atmosphere. And we get regulated rain all the time. You know, it's just beautiful. Very hot in the summer. But, you know, especially now, it's just a beautiful, beautiful time of year. And the more that these Krishna consciousness activities go on, the more that the earth gives. Just like in Preacher Maharaj's time, at one point he was very angry at the earth. And he went after the earth to capture her and to punish her because she was withholding the grains and food stuff. And his people were starving. So he was upset about it. So he went after her, but she took the form of a cow. So she, in her prayers, she was like, nothing, you can't, you please, you can't, I'm a woman and I'm a cow. And, you know, you can't hurt me, you can't punish me. You have to listen to my story. So Pritya was angry at her, King Pritya, but he listened to her. And she was explaining that all these people are ravaging the earth. They're ravaging my land. They're taking so many grains, you know, but they're not using any of it in the service of the Lord. And that's why she's withholding, because everything that she gives from the earth is supposed to be used in the service of Krishna. So as long as it's not being used, the earth starts to withhold, and that's what we see. We see that there's food shortages. We see that there's water shortages. What's the solution? Harinama, Harinama. So this is a solution that Srila Prabhupada gave to the Lieutenant of Police in Chicago. And that's the solution he's given to us. And of course, you know, devotees are taking that up in a very serious way as they become, you know, as they attain this peace and they attain this higher taste, because, you know, Vishya Vinivartante, you know, that there's so many distractions in the material world, but as one develops a higher taste, you know, like it said on the purport, that the desire for sense gratification may be there, but because the devotee has a higher taste, because he's engaged in his service, you know, that he's able to keep himself from acting on those desires. Just like the process of devotional service starts with some faith, some shraddha, and then it's embellished by sadhusanga, by associated with devotees, that everyone's working together, you know, to attain the same goal. And then bhajana kriya, by engaging in devotional service, and also by bhajana, by anartha nivritti, of gradually giving up sinful activities, you know, letting those go as you develop that higher taste, and then developing some steadiness. And of course, that's really what saves all of us, is that we have these processes. When we get up, Immediately we pay obeisances. We open the doors to the deities. We offer prayers to the deities. We say samsara prayers to the deities. We make offerings. We bathe the deities. So, basically in a devotee's life, who has time for anything else? We are so engaged, but because we have that param dishva nivartate, because we have that higher taste, it isn't dry. It isn't something dry that, oh, now we have to do this, now we have to do that. No, we love it. We love Krishna. We love our devotees. Just like here in Alachua, we had this beautiful Radhastami. We had a brand new Vyasasan, wooden, carved wooden with gold inlay, and beautiful clothing, and so many decorations all over the temple that really, so many devotees, maybe 100 devotees or more. What to speak of the feast? All devotees engaging in this beautiful celebration. And then as soon as that one's over, engage in the next one. So we're so fortunate to have these processes because it protects us and it helps elevate us to the very highest position. I mean, King Prithu, he eventually forgave the earth and reinstated her in her position. And he had so many tests, like he was engaged in a 100-year horse sacrifice. And after 99 horses, King Indra, who became afraid that King Prithu was after his situation, he went disguised as a sannyasi and he stole the horse. So at first, King Prithu's son didn't know who it was. So this actually happened a couple of times where King Indra took the horse and then would return it. So King Prithu became angry, but Lord Brahma came down and he said, there's no reason for you to be angry, and there's no reason for you to continue this horse sacrifice. Because again, the real sacrifice is what you're already doing, with the chanting and with the leading, being a great leader of the people. So immediately King Prithu gave up his anger, and Indra came. He was kind of standing to the sidelines, but he came to pay obeisances to King Prithu for his offense. King Prithu immediately, just like King Ambarish, embraced him and completely forgave them. So what to speak of these big offenses? Now, in our own lives, in our own association with devotees and non-devotees, it's so easy to become offended, by some situation. It could be a cross look, or it could be, some offense, real or imagined. But if we can just take shelter of these great devotees who are able to let go of great offenses and realize that, that forgiveness gives us such a strength, and that will be able to carry us and help us to develop, the 26 qualities of a devotee, and help us to have that steady mind and controlled intelligence, and not get distracted. Because devotees who have left, Prabhupada actually said, is because of offenses. I mean, it may be that someone offended them to begin with, but then if you react to it, then you're also engaged in that process of, just like in the sacrifice, with Daksha, who offended Lord Shiva. And then, Lord Shiva's servants and Daksha's servants, they become engaged with cursing and counter cursing, and everyone gets involved, and except Lord Shiva doesn't get involved. He's completely Atmaram, completely peaceful. But then Daksha gets the head of a goat. He gets a reaction for it, but finally comes to some realization. So if we can internalize these lessons of really understanding the process of devotional service, and what our goal is, to please Krishna and receive these blessings. Lord Krishna was so pleased with King Prithu. It said that he came down and King Prithu offered prayers to him, and Krishna, he was about to leave, but he was so taken by King Prithu's devotional mood that this is kind of interesting to me. It said that, residents of Burloka up to Swaloka, that they don't touch the ground, they hover above the ground. Because King Prithu was standing on the ground, Krishna thought he also stood on the ground, but he was so unused to standing on the ground, he put his arm around Garuda to kind of steady him. And he gave King Prithu so many blessings. And that's another thing that I wanted to mention, because as I was reading the story of King Ambarish and of King Prithu, Prabhupada says that anyone who reads a story or hears a story, that they are giving such a shruti fall, such a blessing, such a benediction from hearing it. So as we talk about these subject matters, to Santicha, that, this conversing about pure devotees, that we're gaining great benedictions, great blessings ourselves. Now, I have a treat for you. I think it's a treat because there's a devotee here in Alacha. Her name is Bhakti Lata. And Bhakti Lata has been engaged in the ISKCON prison ministry for many years, and she interacts with the prisoners, and she sends them books and beads and, gives them hope. So she has the newsletter she puts out. It's called the Freedom Newsletter. And of course, we understand that we're all in the prison house. The proof is we're in a material body. That's the proof, that we have this body and we came here to enjoy in some way. So the prisoners, it's more real for them, because in this specific prisoner that I'm going to read a letter from, in the newsletter, there was an excerpt that he had shared, and it's so amazing to me that I wanted to share with you. So I'll start. I think you'll really like it. So this prisoner says, I want to thank you again for all you've done to rescue me from suffering in this material existence. I have 10 months left in solitary confinement. He's already been there for 20 years, but for the last 2 years, he's been in solitary confinement. And I am set and determined to learn as much as I can about the supreme absolute truth and his pastimes, because I want to make it my life's mission that others in my situation can experience the peace and happiness of Krishna consciousness with freedom from fear, stress, and anxiety of the world and of prison life. This age-old science answers all of life's mystery while giving freedom, peace, happiness, and showing us how to love God. It is so perfect for all people, especially those men and women who are incarcerated and bereft of hope, need of love and guidance. So this is just what Prabhupada was saying. Prison life would be so much more peaceful and productive with Krishna consciousness available to the inmates. I've been in the Department of Corrections in Florida for 20 years and never met a practitioner of Bhakti Yoga. I've studied religion and the esoteric for those 20 years. The first time I read the Bhagavad-gita As It Is, I knew I had finally found what I've always been searching for. And all the other books of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, that I have read and studied have only reinforced that notion. I never really wanted to give up intoxicants, gambling, meat, fish, eggs, or sex, but I now hate these things. I'm studying many books by Srila Prabhupada and learning a great deal about the science of the soul, love of God, and the absolute truth. I pray this will qualify me to inform others of this wonderful science without being an offender. In this science, God gives the answers to all of life's mysteries with authority. And I've never felt such peace, happiness, or the love and presence of God. I must share this. Chant and be happy. In this Kali Yuga, there's no other way. There's no other way. There's no other way. Bhakti Dasi, I've enclosed another approval form for the japa beads. With the 10 months I have left in solitary, just me and the Supreme Lord Krishna, I can chant 16 rounds a day and cleanse the filth from my heart and prepare me for my mission to spread Krishna consciousness in the Florida prison system. This Krishna consciousness movement has me actually happy to be in prison, to spread this science to those who need it most. I'm even blessed to be doing solitary, so I can learn Krishna consciousness without distractions or interference. All the books you sent reinforce what I've learned, and I believe Krishna guides me. I hear through his divine grace's purports. I read, I pray, I remember. The book that gave me the newest knowledge is Teachings of Queen Kunti. I've never been so at peace or felt so close to God. I've never felt happier, especially giving up meat, intoxication, gambling, and sex. I want to learn as much as I can so I may spread this peace and happiness to others in my situation. I can only wish someone could have shown me this path years ago. This path does not require blind faith. I used to feel so sorry for myself, for my imprisonment, for the loss of wealth and support, the loss of my family. But Krishna has shown me I've lost all of that so that I may gain him. Because in my arrogance and ignorance, I would have never sought the absolute truth. I'm at peace and thank God for my loss, because the more I lose, the more I gain. Hare Krishna. I'm currently what is called CM, close management. It's the punishment of about 2 years of complete isolation, which has helped me find myself and Krishna. But I can't help to spread this message till I get off. I would like to use this time to get as much knowledge and growth as I can to prepare me to help others. This is the first holiday season in some years that I have not been lonely and depressed. Thank you so much for the Freedom newsletter. It answered a question I had about how to fast, and the calendar showed me the Ekadasi days of the month. It was also nice to see part of my letter in this issue. I learned in the letters from other Florida inmates that I can find the audio track of Prabhupada's chanting japa on our tablets. Hare Krishna. And the Bhakti Guided magazine I received warmed my heart. I pray to be able to answer others' questions and be an example of Krishna consciousness. I'm still getting distracted while chanting, and I feel that japa beads will assist me greatly by including the hand, the sense of touch. So, all the senses, the sense of touch, and helping to focus the turbulent mind on the task. I give my respectful obeisances to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for prescribing the method in this age of Kali. I give my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, for bringing this science to the West, and by his books being our instructional guru. All glories to them. I am all yours. You are my only refuge and support. Protect me, guide me, have pity on me, my Lord, and kindly remove some of the Maya. He actually says farther down, he says, I can understand that if all this hadn't happened to me, I would never have been a devotee. So I'm grateful for this situation. I'm grateful to have found Krishna. I'm a soul surrendered unto you. The most precious gift is the true knowledge I've gained from the books written by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. For if it was written by His Divine Grace, then it was spoken by Krishna as it is. So unbelievable that this devotee has gone from like 0 to 1 million in such a short amount of time, because he's taking it all into his heart. And I have one more shorter excerpt, which I think you'll like. It's kind of funny. So this person is in the military veterans unit, and he said, a few months ago, one of my buddies visited my living area a few times. Whenever he would visit, he would stare at the pictures on my altar, especially those of Krishna. Whenever he would do this, I would ask him, what's up? And he would just say, I'm just looking. Mind you, this buddy of mine is a combat-hardened paratrooper. Of course, being a paratrooper, he cannot be totally sane, considering he willingly jumped out of a perfectly good aircraft, fully loaded down with gear, into a hot zone, and loved doing it. So anyway, this macho warrior was again staring at Krishna's picture, and out of nowhere, my buddy says, that blue chick is hot. I busted out laughing. And he looked at me confused. He said, what? She is hot looking. This caused me to laugh even more. Again, he asked, what? This time with a little bit more panic in his voice. I finally managed to say, well, that blue chick is the supreme person of Godhead, God, and he is known as Krishna, which means all attractive. I went back to laughing as his reaction was a moment of shock, well hidden unless you knew him. So anyway, he then begins staring again at Krishna, cocks his head, and then straight deadpan says, well, he's still hot, and smiles a huge grin at me. Since my buddy was so attracted to Krishna, I gave him 2 of those mantra cards with the Maha Mantra on the back, one with a picture of Krishna and one with a picture of Radha Krishna. Well, anyway, a few weeks ago, my buddy is sorting through and packing what he was taking to go home. He was leaving that day. At one point, he takes these 2 pictures he had put up on the inside of his locker door and said to all of us gathered nearby that he had to take Krishna, my hot-looking God, with him. I realized that just how attractive Krishna truly is to everyone, no matter their background, even battle-hardened macho warriors like my buddy. Jai Shri Krishna. So this is great service that this devotee, Bhakti Lata, engages in. And you can see the result. There's many more excerpts, but maybe we should just stop here, see if somebody has any questions or anybody has any additions or realizations, anything they'd like to share.
Well, I just had a question. Do you know anything about the history of the first person who is in prison?
I don't.
If you do, I have a question. If you don't, I will ask it.
Yeah. No, I really don't. I don't think,
Okay.
I don't even know if Bhakti Dasi knows. She might. But to be in there for that long, 20 years, and it doesn't sound like he's getting out anytime soon, it's very possibly like a murder or, something really bad like that. So, and we can see that, again, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, that, it's lust, and then, unfulfilled lust leads to anger, which leads to, bewilderment of memory. And like Prabhupada says, from there, anything can happen. He gave an example, actually, Prabhupada, of this man who had 2 sons. And the 2 sons got in an argument about something, and one ended up killing the other one. And so the one son's dead, and this man's other son is about to be hanged. But the father goes to court, and he's like pitiful, saying, my one son has already died, and now this other son is going to be hanged. Please, could you, just give him life imprisonment and not kill him? So he did get that. He was able to arrange that. But the point is, he lost his mind, and they often say that, even in the, even in the plea, it can be something like they plead a temporary insanity, due to, maybe the wife went off with somebody else or whatever it may be. So it must have been a very serious crime. But to see this man, take so seriously to Krishna consciousness, and to have that realization that all of this has happened because Krishna is just bringing me to him. It's like so advanced that I was really so impressed with this testimony, and really enlivened by this testimony, and really also enlivened to want to, give books out as often as I can. Like the other day, we got an Amazon package, and so, I just said to the guy, oh, I've got books on yoga and, meditation, vegetarian. Would you like one? He goes, yeah, sure. So I got a book, I gave it to him, and, told him where the temple was, invited him to come. So you never know how these books, and even like this paratrooper, who he said was like really insane because of what he likes to do, jump out of airplanes, fully loaded into a hot zone. So very, very reckless with his own life, so generally people, they try to be careful. They don't want to go into dangerous situations. They don't want to get injured. But this particular veteran, for whatever reason, enjoys doing that. but he's also attracted to Krishna. So understanding that, Krishna has all those qualities, all knowledge, all beauty, all attractive, all renunciation, all fame. He's got everything, and he's all attractive. And as we present him to people in whatever form, people will ultimately become attractive. So I don't know if they have a program like that in New York, or if there's like one program, national program that serves different states. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, I'm not sure about it, but those are thrilling, exciting, captivating, inspiring stories. And I guess my comment is something that I'm thinking about is related to what you said, that when you hear about this, it makes you feel even more like than you already did, like that you want to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books to help people. You mentioned prasadam distribution. And I'm thinking, without giving an anecdote, although I could, I guess what I'm thinking is there's plenty of persons who I or others have given a little taste of Krishna consciousness at one point in my life and at one point in their respective lives, given it to them. And it may have just been, for some of them, it may have been a 5-minute interaction or even 2-minute interaction where their heart was touched enough that they wanted to accept what your gift of Krishna or my gift of Krishna consciousness to them for that small interaction. And then thereafter, they may have apparently carried on with their life and put aside, for the most part, this transcendental gift they were given. Or sometimes it may not just, that's an example like for book distribution in many cases, they don't necessarily take it up right away, the Krishna consciousness. Or it may be that maybe someone, on the other hand, there may be someone who does take up Krishna consciousness for a few months or even 2 years, and then they go. In both cases, I have full faith, and I also have personal experience of this with certain people, that that gift of Krishna consciousness that they received, even if they didn't embrace it over the long run at the time that they witnessed them take the gift, later on, they're having taken the gift before, later on, the Krishna consciousness in them will manifest once again. And they can become like a better devotee than I am. Not that I'm not that that's a high standard to surpass, but they can become a better devotee. They could become a pure devotee. So in other words, because everyone is a devotee at heart, even when they appear like utter karmis, and everyone is a devotee, and everyone has an eternal relationship with Krishna, and therefore that's totally feasible. It's not just totally feasible, it's real. It actually happens. We just don't see it before our eyes most of the time, most of us. But it's actually a real thing. And so that's why it's so important that before we get the full understanding, like there's jnana, which is theoretical knowledge, you could say, of Krishna, and there's vijnana, which is realized knowledge of Krishna. So before we get the vijnana that everyone is truly a devotee of Krishna, before we totally get that, like we can feel it, we can see it, before we have that vijnana, we should take the word of Srila Prabhupada and those who repeat it, that is true, that everyone's devotee of Krishna, and we should take their word for it, that we should, use the time that we're able to support Srila Prabhupada's mission in giving out Krishna consciousness to others, whether we're doing it directly or indirectly helping others, but somehow or other try to be a part of that what Prabhupada set up, because there will be great benefit to others, even though we don't see it. We should take their word for it, that because we don't have the Vigyan, we should take their word for it, that they have it, that they're correct, and serve them, so that Krishna consciousness can proliferate, and people's lives can turn around from being, sometimes happy, other times full of misery, like people in prison, or this world is kind of like a prison, to being eternally happy. And by supporting the process, we can also get the same that will help us to turn the Gyan for ourselves into the Vigyan. By supporting the process over time, we can get the realization more. So that was just a little thing. So the things you were talking about, Sukhada Mataji, that inspired me to come up with this. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's we just don't know, because Prabhupada said these books are like deities, and they act, and you never know when. I think I told the story maybe last time I gave class about the woman from Spain on the bus. Do you remember that story?
Please tell it.
Okay. So there was a woman on a bus in Spain, and she was giving out, books, Bhagavad-gitas, and this man called her over, and so she gave him a Bhagavad-gita. So he proceeded to take the Bhagavad-gita, he ripped it in half, and he threw it on the floor, and he pushed the devotee out the door. So, he felt bad, not about pushing the devotee out the door, but about littering the floor. So he picked up the Bhagavad-gita, put it in a bag, he brought it home, and he threw it away in the garbage. And his maid found it, and she thought, oh, what's this doing? This must be a mistake. She put it together, she taped it together, and she put it up on the bookshelf. So time went by, years went by, his wife got cancer, she died. Now he has cancer, and he's sitting there, and he looks up and he sees that book. He takes it down, he's miserable. He starts reading it, and he's like, oh my God, because, you have cancer, you're going to die. So finally, he's getting some relief. He's getting some understanding about life, but he's also feeling great remorse at what he's done. So he becomes a devotee, but he finds this girl, he finds this devotee woman, and he apologizes, receives forgiveness, from her. So there's so many stories of devotees who got a book and didn't immediately surrender, but, over time, there actually there was a man that came, his name was Hans, and he came to Sunday feast with his girlfriend, and he seemed a little like, I don't know, not totally crazy, but a little unstable. But, he had gone to like different concerts, met the devotees over the years, and liked the devotees. So he ended up helping a kuti on the eco farm. They have an eco farm here. So, planting flowers, milking cows, just, helping to set up the eco farm garden. And he was really good at, I think it was setting marble, different things like that. But his brain tumor kept getting worse and worse. He'd have to go to the hospital, he'd come back, he'd seem okay, but ultimately he ended up in the hospital. They operated on him. He seemed okay, but what happened is I didn't really hear from him or anything about him. And one day I was milking the cows. My son has the service of milking the cow, and I often help him. So I was sitting there milking the cow, and this man came up, was asking questions about the cows, and he said, "Do you know a man named Hans?" I said, "Yeah, actually I do, I know he died of a brain tumor." He said, "Yeah, well, I was there," because it seemed like he was okay. But then, it was just his time to go. So he said, "I was there. I was talking with him, and all of a sudden he said, I can't talk anymore." He said, "I have to focus on Krishna now." And he died like that. He died focusing on Krishna, this kind of hippie-ish time of guy who just visited the devotees over time, probably engaged in some kirtan. But at the final time of death, he was blessed with remembrance of Krishna. And this doctor was impressed enough. He'd never been to the temple, but he came to tell me that. And he also said to me, if there's anybody else that ever needs help in your congregation, he gave me his name and his number. Please let me know, So, and how many people are like that? We've seen the devotees here, seen the devotees there, maybe just had like you said, a short interval, a short conversation, but yet, it was uplifting because devotees, with their love, and you may have had the experience as a devotee of people just pouring out their hearts to you. I know in Sankirtan, I have people like just telling me their whole life, their whole life story, in a capsulized way, because they feel like here's somebody who can understand, and of course we can give them some solutions, just like the idea of reincarnation. I remember I met this one man in the airport, and his wife and daughter had been killed in a car accident. So he really wanted nothing. He goes, I don't want anything to do with anything. My wife and daughter were just killed in a car accident. I said, okay, just sit down with me for a minute. So we sat down and I talked to him. I explained to him about reincarnation. I explained to him that, this wasn't the end of their existence, and that who would know that he would meet up with them again in the future, gave him some books like that. And so what a relief to know about the eternal soul. And, devotees have a big task because, the atheists are really, they're very active, they're really active on so many social media platforms. But devotees are very active too. But ultimately, we see some of these atheists at the time of death. Actually, I was talking to this one woman, she is in our community. She's a Harvard graduate with 2 degrees. And so it's kind of like, when you have that much education from such a prestigious university, it can be a little bit of what do I want to say? It can be a little bit crippling because you know so much, but you know so little, so your mind is so occupied with everything that you're kind of a yoni, and so it's a little hard to like totally dive into bhakti. But she did say to me that a friend of hers who was dying said to her, I wish I knew where I was going. But yet we have yet vapyastamam bhavat jatyanti kalevaram, that whatever state of mind you have when you leave your body, that's the state you attain. And so like Hans, we want, we're practicing for that time. Now, Hans didn't really know he was practicing for that time, although at the end of his life, due to his association with devotees, he was able to associate with a Kuti, who is a very advanced devotee, and always told him stories and always engaged him. And he was able to achieve that perfection. So, you never really know what's going to happen because again, just hearing the story, like we just heard the story of Shabari Muni. We heard the story of Ambarish Maharaj, and Prabhupada said, anybody who hears that story will go back to Godhead. So we've already got it. We're already there. So we're so fortunate. All we have to do now is share it with other people. And, it'll be like perfection upon perfection. So, yeah. Maybe some of you, go ahead.
I have one thing to say. It's personal, but some people know this here, that my father just passed away. Actually, a week and a half ago. It was on Radhastami.
Whoa.
And and my father, he came to quite a few Rath Yatras in the 90s. He got prasadam, here and there when I would visit them, and when I was with Subhangada visiting them. He came to temple a few times, although they tried to bribe me to move out of the temple. I remember he met me on Sankirtan by coincidence in Harvard Square when I was distributing books there, because he is a Harvard grad. He was at a reunion, and he was there just doing his thing at the reunion. He bumped into me. I was in full devotee regalia, and he said, Timmy, he said, you're doing the best thing that's possible you could do with your time. Now, mind you, when he's with my mom, a few months before or after, we're going to give you this nice car, brand new car, and a, kind of fancy one if you move out of the temple. So,
You
we
mean
remember. What's that?
Recently?
No, this is in the 90s.
see.
I was living in the temple from 90 to 98. I
Okay.
declined their offer. When I was finally ready to move out of the temple as a grihasta, instead they gave me a used car that wasn't fancy. So, so anyway, but so he definitely didn't appear to be a devotee whatsoever, because my mom is apparently a staunch atheist, and my dad is a very quiet supporter of my mom, and he creates peace in their household. But he always appreciated what I was doing, but he would never kind of say anything. But there were a few private times, like once he came to the Brooklyn Temple in 91 or 92 with me, and he saw it was kind of packed. There were a lot of brahmacharis jumping up and down near Radha Govinda in the front of the temple room. And he said, Timmy, he said they're dancing ecstatically.
Wow.
Now who even says ecstatic in reference to anything Krishna conscious except devotees? That's a devotee word, right? Anyway, so then he passed away. I don't think he passed away under normal circumstances. Materially speaking, I think something happened that probably, there was a mistake probably by the doctors. In any case, I see it all as Krishna's arrangement. I experienced quite some sadness. I was affected like any regular human being is. But at one point, I had some experience, so I took my brother with me. My mom was with my father in the hospital at the time he was pronounced having passed away. And so she didn't want to come with us to the funeral home to view my father's body afterwards. So that seems bad. It was actually good. Because this gave me the freedom to do certain things that I could not do in the presence of my mom out of respect for my mom. Without her presence, I can kind of a carte blanche for me. And plus my brother, he kind of likes devotional things. So he's come to the temple with me a few times in the 90s. He's come to a temple for, a wedding ceremony. He likes prasadam. He's not a devotee, but he's favorable in his own way.
Right.
So he came with me to the funeral home. We viewed my father's body. I took off. You may see I don't have tulsi on around my neck because I gave my dad my tulsi and I wrapped it around his neck. I didn't. Some people would be scared, with a body like doing. For me, it was just. I was happy to see my dad's body, even though he passed away. Put the tulsi around him. Subsequent, I didn't necessarily have a scripture to cite, but subsequently, Ram Roy sent me a message. He said, if someone's cremated with their body is cremated with tulsi around them, then they go back to Godhead.
Wow.
I knew it's good for him to tulsi. I didn't necessarily make quite that connection when I did it, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Then my brother, I told my brother what I was planning to do while we were driving towards the funeral home. And I said, if you want, you can say something after I do my prayer. And he said, oh no, that's nice you're doing the prayer. I said, well, you could join me if you want. And he said, okay. So then my brother, we actually did what I thought was going to be a 5-minute kirtan or 3-minute kirtan followed by a long Bhagavad-gita reading, or that maybe 20-minute reading. Instead, it became about almost like a 20-something, 25-minute kirtan, a 30-minute Bhagavad-gita reading. And had an incredible kirtan, and I was feeling like we're in Vrindavan before Radhashama Sundar, and there's a whole ton of devotees, sort of like that little thing I was saying in the beginning of the class. Like was a whole ton of devotees with mridangas and kartals. Not that they were necessarily they're standing there with me, but I could feel that like it was there at the same time. anyway, so we're having nice kirtan. My brother, I was praying for my father to take Krishna's mercy. I was praying for Krishna to give my dad mercy. At one point, I wanted to stop the kirtan, a little self-conscious. My brother's there with me. And then I said, no, let's keep going. So we keep on going with the kirtan. And then I was thinking, then I was praying, okay, Krishna's giving you the mercy, Dad. Now you have to accept it. So I was praying to my dad to take the mercy. And then the mercy was getting more and more and more, and it was getting more and more ecstatic. And I was just kind of following along, understanding that, I'm just sort of like part of this episode, but, I'm just sort of lucky to experience this. I don't really, I'm not doing anything. So we're having this ecstatic kirtan, and my brother is heartfelt. He's going for it. He's a cool, funny guy. And then after we did a very, very wonderful Bhagavad-gita reading, the first 30 verses of the second chapter, the entire 10th chapter, and then I think 1862 through 78 of the Bhagavad Gita reading. I would read the Sanskrit, then my brother and I would switch off reading the English for each verse. We did that about half an hour. Then my brother said a little something for my dad, cried a little, kissed my dad's forehead, because then I said something kind of to my dad, to Krishna, and that was it. So there was something more that, anyway, but one thing that my brother said when we walked out, I asked my brother, his name is Tony. I said, Tony, so how was that experience? What did you think? He said, well, Tim, my brother's like a pretty straight guy. He's got 2 daughters, a wife, they do everything the kind of the right normal way in life. Nothing, there's no like spiritually interesting thing in his life. There's no weird bad things in his life. It's all kind of straight, good American guy. So he told me, he said, Tim, Atman Nivedana for the devotees, for my family, I'm Tim. He said, Tim, I saw Dad open his eyes at one point, and I also saw him smiling. Now I saw the same thing, but I said, so my brother saying that confirmed it. Now for someone hearing this story, they're like, oh, this guy, he's imagining, so he's speculating. That's okay. But there was also before I became a devotee. So I went to Brown University before I moved into the temple, and I used to be I was a bit of an artist, and I was rather visual, and I was chanting 16 rounds. I had some funny experiences that weren't as straight as I described my brother's experiences before I became a devotee. But I had one vision while I was in some class at school, and I was drawing because I was getting ready to move into the temple in a couple months, and I didn't really care so much for school. So I was doing these kind of cool drawings. But I had before I drew this devotee of sort of like some effulgent devotee standing there, I would just draw things from my mind, not realistic things, but this was like very realistic and cool looking. But before I drew that, I had a vision just of myself, and I had sort of long curly hair and a little hippie, a little punk, but I was also like getting, straight A's at university, at Ivy League school. So I was kind of an odd person, I suppose. But I had a vision of myself as just like this, devotee wearing tilak and wearing robes. I was like, what's this? What is this? This is before I moved to the temple. I didn't know. And then later it became true. And then I drew a picture of it before it became true. I didn't know that picture was kind of what I was. But during the kirtan with my father, connecting these two little things, going to the kirtan at the funeral with my father, I saw, my father, it's him, but I saw him with, dhoti and kurta and shaved head and tilak. And like I understood that he got initiated at that time. So it's kind of everyone who knows me knows that I would never talk about anything like this. I'm always kind of by the book, and you keep your personal things that may sound a little bit, very, something. That's not the way I do. But this is, since we're talking about anecdotes and meaningful, amazing things, and what can happen at the time of death, how you can get Krishna's mercy. Well, this is an experience I had. And then the following day, I thought my wife doesn't like seeing dead bodies or anything, but she came with me because my brother had a strong dose on this is not this past week, but the week before. He had a strong dose of the Krishna conscious experience with my dad on Thursday. So my wife didn't want me to go alone to the crematorium to have my dad's body burned there. So Subhangada came with me there. So we did again another big kirtan, and this time I was praying to send my dad off. And at one time we felt like, okay, it's time. I kept on going with the kirtan, and then at one point I said, okay, now Hare Krishna, we're done, because we had some. And then I was doing like a Srila Prabhupada ki jai, this and this ki jai, and then Subhangada says, don't, she's thinking she experienced what I did. If that my father was off to Krishna, if I say Bhaktajari ki jai, and we've never in our life referred to him as Bhaktajari, and that's what I said. And she's like, oh, so it's the same thing with my brother and I, she and I. Anyway, so one can take from this whatever one wants, but whether this experience one can believe that the way that I believe it. Naturally, it may be hard to, because it's
I think it's really nice, and I think it's important to share personal stories like that. I have to leave very soon, but there's another time I can tell. Like, my sister passed away in November. She had ovarian cancer, and the situation was also very, was very rewarding for me, just the way everything happened and how I was able to help her. So, again, in the chapter about King Prithu, and in other places too, Prabhupada makes the point that Krishna blesses his devotees and everybody that's close, that's close to him. So your family members naturally get some of that, the benefit, of us being devotees. We know that. Prabhupada says that. But Prabhu, I actually have to go now.
Okay.
But I want to thank you, for sharing your story. And it was a pleasure to be with you and all the devotees who are listening.
Thank you very much, Sukhada Mataji. We look forward to getting your association sometime soon, hopefully.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sukhada.
Mother Sukhada, so you can join me if you like. Mother Sukhada Mataji ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, Hare Bol.